You've seen a little of the variety of Nigerian life. The job of holding the country together falls on 4 men. The Sardana of Sokoto on the left, Premier of the North, a commanding figure in any company. From the east, Dr. Azikiwe, pioneer nationalist, soon to be Governor General. From the west, Chief Awolowo, opposition leader in the federal parliament. And the cornerstone of unity, the federal Prime Minister, Alhaji Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, a northerner trusted by all.
Just 6 years after Nigeria gained her independence in October 1960, the first military coup took place on January 15, 1966. Reasons were stated that the men at the helm of affairs were running Nigeria aground with their corrupt ways. The corruption of certain government ministers drew public criticisms, especially the flamboyant lifestyle of Chief Festo Sokoto, who was known as one of the most corrupt ministers back then. This bloody coup led to the killings of 22 people, including the Prime Minister of Nigeria, many senior politicians, senior army officers and their wives. Major Kaduna Nzeogwu was said to have been the mastermind behind the coup, with the support of other army majors like Emmanuel Fajuna, Timothy Atuegu, Chris Anuforo, Don Okafor, Humphrey Chukwuka, Adewale Ademiyiga, and many others. It was said that their main aim was to carry out a successful coup, free Obafemi Awolowo from prison, and install him as the Prime Minister of Nigeria. Chief Obafemi Awolowo, on the other hand, was a Nigerian nationalist and politician who played a key role in Nigeria's independence movement. He was also the founder of the Action Group, a political party which was established in Ibadan on 21st March 1951. He was arrested and convicted of treason and was jailed under Tafawa Balewa for conspiring with the Ghanaian authorities to overthrow the federal government. Major Patrick Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeogwu was the chief instructor at the Nigerian Training College in Kaduna. Born on the 26th of February 1937 in the northern region capital of Kaduna to Igbo immigrant parents from the Midwest region. Given the fact that he was born and raised in the north, he was mostly called the nickname Kaduna by his colleagues. When not in his army uniform, he wore northern mufti and frequently referred to himself as a northerner. He spoke fluent Hausa. Most people claim that Nzeogwu's participation in the January 1966 coup was part of the Igbo agenda to dominate the country. This argument overlooks the fact that Nzeogwu was an Igbo in name only. It was also clear that Nzeogwu had harbored some anti-government sentiments for several years before 1966. Nzeogwu's boss at the Nigerian Military Training College, Colonel Raf Shedende, had in the past reported Nzeogwu to the army headquarters for allegedly spreading anti-government rhetoric to junior officers. Shedende's reports claimed that Nzeogwu had been attempting to poison junior officers' mind against the government. Major Nzeogwu was so disappointed with the ridiculous vote rigging in the country's election that he exclaimed, "It is impossible to vote out a Nigerian minister." Major Emmanuel Arinze Ifajuna was a brigade major in Lagos, born around 1935 in Onitsha. He was an international athlete who held the Commonwealth record for high jumping at the Empire Stadium in Vancouver, Canada. He was also a graduate of the University of Ibadan and was often called the nickname Ima Vancouver. Ifajuna was the brains behind the coup and wrote a manuscript on the reason why he felt a military coup was necessary. This manuscript has never been published. Before the actual day of the coup, no less than 9 majors were originally built to take part in the coup. These 9 majors were Major Kaduna Nzeogwu, Emmanuel Fajuna, Adewale Ademiyiga, Don Okafor, Chris Anuforo, Humphrey Chukwuka, John Obienu, Timothy Atuegu, and Chude Soki. Shortly before the coup, Chude Soki was posted overseas, and on the coup day itself, Obienu failed to show up, leaving 7 majors as participants. Although there were more officers who participated in the coup but were not often named, like Captain Bembule, Emmanuel Wobosi, Ogbonna Oji, Ganiyu Adeleke, and Emmanuel Deaja. The coup was to be carried out in Lagos, Kaduna, Ibadan, Enugu, and Benin City. Nzeogwu was regional commander of the coup in northern Nigeria with Nzeogwu as a co-commander. Bembule was one of the officers who participated in the coup under their command. The commander in Lagos was Ifajuna, and co-commanders were Anuforo, Chukwuka, Ademiyiga, and Okafor. Ifajuna also had oversight of the western region, but the actual execution of the coup there was overseen by Captain Wobosi. Few weeks to the day of the coup, Nzeogwu carried out an inspection on the official lodge of the region premier, the Sultanate of Sokoto, Sir Ahmadu Bello. Nzeogwu often took his men on a 9-time training exercise known as Exercise Daminsa. The men were unaware that the military exercise they were participating in was actually a practice run for a military coup to overthrow the government. As chief instructor of the Nigerian Military Training College, Nzeogwu could organize such exercises without arousing any suspicion. Brigadier Ademilegwu, the then commander of the 2nd Brigade in Kaduna, became aware of this exercise and was irritated by the 9-time training. When he became aware that soldiers had been going near the Premier's lodge, he reprimanded Nzeogwu in a telephone call and warned him to keep his military exercise a safe distance away from the Premier's lodge. Ademilegwu complained about the commotion but took no further action as he was unaware of the exercise real purpose. On the final night of the exercise at midnight, 14th of January, Nzeogwu told the officers the real purpose of the exercise. The group, made up of military personnel from all parts of Nigeria, welcomed the idea of a coup to unseat the unpopular government. Nzeogwu said in an interview with the defunct Kaduna-based New Nigerian newspaper of 18 January 1966, after the coup, that on Saturday morning, the other officers and men thought they were going out only on a night exercise. It was not until they were out in the bush that they were told the full details of the plan. Any man had the chance to drop out. More than that, they had bullets. They had been issued with bullets but was unarmed. If they had disagreed, they could have shot me. Most of the other ranks were not unarmed, but they followed. It was a true Nigerian gathering. Only in the army do you get true Nigerianism. Nzeogwu and his men blew open the gates of the Sultan's lodge, and Nzeogwu personally conducted a search of the residence, hunting for Bello. After losing his temper at his initial failure to locate him, Nzeogwu found Bello hiding with his wives. Bello was shot by Nzeogwu. Bello's faithful bodyguard, who came to defend him with a bow and arrow, was also shot, as well as one of his wives who tried to shield him with her body. Nzeogwu was strictly committed to the coup and was the only one of the plotters able to carry out his mission successfully. His personal declaration that it is impossible to vote out a Nigerian minister showed his own belief in his actions. Also, one of the soldiers who attacked Bello's house with Nzeogwu was also killed. There is an account that Nzeogwu shot him for refusing to fire the anti-tank weapon used on the Premier's house. Some of the policemen on guard duty at the Premier's house were reportedly shot by the intruders. Nzeogwu himself was also wounded in the attack. Nzeogwu's accomplice, Major Timothy Nzeogwu, personally led a squad of soldiers to Brigadier Ademilegwu's house. Nzeogwu made his way up to the brigadier's bedroom, where he was laying beside his wife. Upon seeing Nzeogwu enter his room, Ademilegwu shouted at him, "Timothy, what the devil do you think you are doing?" Nzeogwu told Ademilegwu that he was under arrest. According to the Major's version of the event, Ademilegwu reached for a drawer beside his bed, and as he did so, Nzeogwu shot him dead in his bed, along with Ademilegwu's wife, who was laying beside him. Colonel Ralph Shedinde was also killed. It was said that a bomb was tossed at him, but his wife, who was present when he was killed, testified that he was shot by several soldiers, including Major Nzeogwu and Nzeogwu. It is not clear whether Nzeogwu could possibly have been involved in Shedinde's death, since presumably he was preoccupied at the time with killing Ahmadu Bello. Most accounts place responsibility for Shedinde's murder with Nzeogwu. If this is your first time here, please do all to subscribe. Thank you. The Lagos coup was led by Major Ifajuna with the support of Major Adewale Ademiyiga, Don Okafor, Chris Anuforo, and Alfred Chukwuka. At around 2 a.m., Ifajuna and some lieutenants left the 2nd Brigade headquarters and made their way to Prime Minister Abubakar Tafawa Balewa's residence. They overpowered but did not kill the police officer standing guard there, and Ifajuna kicked down the door of the Prime Minister's bedroom before leading him out at gunpoint and arrested him. Ifajuna hosted his co-plotters shortly after playing right-hand man to Brigadier Mamilare, who was celebrating his new marriage. Brigadier Mamilare's party was a first-class reception, attended by well-known people in Lagos. including many of the plotters and other military officers who had attended the brigade military conference. The party was a befitting conclusion to the conference, and Ifajuna played a significant role in organizing it as a brigade major. At the meeting of the plotters in Ifajuna's house after the party, Captain Adeleke, who was one of the plotters, initially had reservations and wanted to leave but was persuaded to stay. Ifajuna then sent signals to the other operators outside Lagos to strike. He codenamed the coup in Lagos Operation New Wash. During the attack on Mamilari's house, he managed to escape from the first attempt to arrest him by Major Don Okafor by jumping over a wall behind his house. But as he was escaping on foot, he came across the car of his brigade major, Imana Ifajuna. Mamilari recognized Ifajuna and did not realize that Ifajuna was part of the coup plot. Believing that Ifajuna could be trusted, Mamilari waved down the car, and immediately he was shot dead by Ifajuna. Lieutenant Colonel Agboku Lagiman, who was the commanding officer of the Ibadan Base Force Battalion, was also killed. He was a guest at the Ikoyi Hotel and had just left the famous party of Brigadier Mamilari that night. Ifajuna arrived at the hotel and forced the desk clerk at gunpoint to inform Lagiman that he had a phone call. When Lagiman emerged from his room in his pajamas to take the fake phone call, he walked into an ambush as Ifajuna and Second Lieutenant Ezedigbo emerged from the hiding place in the corridor and shot him dead. Major General Ironsi, who was the Army's GOC, was tipped off about the coup through a telephone call from the Army's Adjutant General, Lieutenant Colonel James Palm. Shortly after ending the call with Ironsi, James Palm was abducted from his house and was arrested by Major Humphrey Chukwuka, who was his friend and second in command. Chukwuka assured Palm's wife that no harm would come to her husband, but Anuforo insisted that Lieutenant Colonel Palm was to be shot. He was told to step out of the vehicle and say his last prayers. Shortly after, Major Anuforo fired a burst from his submachine gun into Palm's body. The bullets penetrated through, hitting his chest and jaw. Lieutenant Colonel Palm was a father of 6 and also a son of the Chief of Jos, and was widely liked within the army. He was also regarded as a very capable officer. Major Chris Anuforo was so quick in the use of his firearm. On the 9th of January 15, he personally shot dead Lieutenant Colonel Palm and Onyegbu, Colonel Kom Mohammed, and the Finance Minister, Chief Festu Sokoto-Ebo. Sokoto-Ebo was widely disliked during the First Republic for his corruption. His arrest was particularly aggressive, and eyewitnesses said that the soldiers who arrested him tossed him into their truck like a sack. He was shot dead by Major Chris Anuforo, despite pleading for his life. Tafawa Balewa, Kom Mohammed, and Sokoto-Ebo were initially arrested, but killed later when it became clear that the coup was not going to succeed. The coup in Ibadan was led by Captain Emmanuel Obosi. Chief Fani Kayode was first arrested by the majors. Immediately after his arrest, his wife informed Chief Akintola of what has happened. Chief Samuel Akintola, who was the premier of the Western region after Awolowo got jailed, had been forewarned that soldiers were coming to get him. He had heard rumors of a coup and had traveled to Kaduna to warn the premier of the Northern region, Ahmadu Bello. Frustrated that his warnings failed to evoke the required degree of urgency from Bello, Akintola returned to Ibadan and armed himself with a rifle. Shortly afterwards, a detachment of soldiers led by Captain Emmanuel Obosi arrived at Akintola's residence. Upon sighting the soldiers, Akintola opened fire, likely wounding a few of them, including Captain Obosi. After bravely fighting for his life and engaging the soldiers in a gunfight, Akintola was shot dead by Captain Obosi and his men. Lieutenant Colonel Ato Onyegbe was the only Igbo officer that was killed during the coup. Most people actually said that Onyegbe was not initially a target of the majors, but was only killed because he refused to surrender the keys of the armory. At the time of the January coup, Onyegbe was the Quartermaster General of the Nigerian Army at Army Headquarters in Lagos. Not being in command of a combat unit, he had no access to any armory keys. Other accounts claim that Onyegbe was killed because he was known to be close to Brigadier Mamilari. The majors probably figured that Nyegbe had to be silenced in order to prevent him from raising the alarm.
The road to the east takes you through high forest, past rich cocoa farms and careering mammy wagons, and so to the eastern region and the hilltop view of its capital, Enugu.
Although there was no coup in the eastern and midwest region, according to Ademuyiga's book Why We Struck, he referred to the difficulties the plotters had in recruiting officers. Major Chude Soki was one of their successes and was put in charge of the East, but before the coup, he was sent abroad for a course. Ifajina and company replaced him with one Lieutenant Oguchi, who was on a course in Lagos. His vehicle broke down on his way to the east from Lagos. He only got to the east in the early hours of the 15th. Major General Aguiyi Ironsi managed to survive the general coup due to the fact that he was tipped off through a telephone call by Lieutenant Colonel James Pan that something unusual was occurring before Pan was abducted and killed. Major Don Okafor failed his task of arresting Ironsi.
My main concern is to restore law and order as soon as possible.
Major General Ironsi, who had gone to a boat party at Apapa after Mamilari's reception, gave his guards warning not to allow anyone into his residence. When Okafor arrived at Ironsi's house, his security stood firm, denying Okafor access to his house. Ironsi's escape was, however, the beginning of the coup's failure. On his way to commence move to crush the coup, Ironsi actually came across some junior officers that were involved in the coup. It is possible that some of these young officers lost their nerve when confronted by the intimidating presence of their GOC. When he encountered a checkpoint manned by some mutineers, Ironsi simply stepped out of his vehicle and shouted, "Get out of my way," an order which was immediately obeyed, before continuing his journey. Backed by many military and police officers, Ironsi put down the coup in Lagos. After the coup failed, Nzeogwu made a statement during an interview with Dennis Ejindu on 22nd of January 1966. He stated that we wanted to get rid of rotten and corrupt ministers, political parties, trade unions, and the whole clumsy apparatus of the federal system. We wanted to gun down all the bigwigs on our way. This was the only way. We could not afford to let them leave if this was to work. We got some, but not all. General Aguiyi was to have been shot, but we were not ruthless enough. As a result, he and other compromisers were able to supplant us. Major General Aguiyi met with the surviving members of the federal cabinet. Even ministers present at the meeting acknowledged that Aguiyi was genuinely upset by the incident and wept about the death of his military colleagues. Aguiyi subdued the coup in Lagos and went ahead to arrest the coup plotters. Ifajina fled to Ghana, where he was welcomed by Kwame Nkrumah, but was later extradited back to Nigeria by the military personnel who overthrew Kwame Nkrumah in 1966. After crushing the coup in Lagos and Ibadan, Aguiyi was advised by the officers to take power as the head of state, abolishing the civilian government, saying that was the only way they can stabilize the country and stop further bloodshed. Aguiyi then had a meeting with the Council of Ministers, asking them to surrender power to the armed forces. He advised that it would be in the interest of the country to temporarily cede power to him to prevent disaster. Later that day, Dr. Orizu made a TAS nationwide broadcast, announcing the cabinet's voluntary decision to transfer power to the armed forces. Major General Aguiyi then made his own broadcast, accepting the invitation. He suspended certain parts of the constitution, set up a national military government with the office of military governors in each region, and briefly outlined the policy intention of his regime. Nigeria's first democratic experiment was effectively over, and that was the beginning of a military rule in the country. Major Nzeogwu, who had successfully carried out his coup in the north, was awaiting an early morning radio announcement from Major Adewale Ademuyiga in Lagos, which did not take place because of the failure of the coup in Lagos. Major Nzeogwu made a mid-afternoon announcement declaring martial law in northern Nigeria. He was told to surrender since most of his colleagues who participated in the coup had been arrested, but he refused. There were also informations that Nzeogwu was gathering forces to attack Lagos.
Now, what are your relations with General Aguiyi in Lagos?
Well, very good. He's my boss. I have always been under him, and I still am under him. There isn't really any problem with you. Misunderstandings arose, but this was due to the publication in the press and by announcements over the radio. At one time, they started calling us in Kaduna rebels, whereas in fact the revolution was all a planned affair all over the country.
Major General Aguiyi Ironsi sent emissaries led by a man Major Nzeogwu heavily respected, Lieutenant Colonel Conrad Nwanwu. He sent him to Kaduna to negotiate peace talks with Major Nzeogwu and a possible surrender. Before Nzeogwu could surrender, he gave Ironsi some conditions as follows: a guarantee of safety for himself, his officers, and all men who took part in the coup, a guarantee that they would not face legal persecution then or at any time later, compensation to be paid to the families of all military personnel killed in the coup, the release of all coup participants in the south, non-return to office of the overthrown government. However, Ironsi gave the guarantees Nzeogwu wanted by phone and through Lieutenant Colonel Conrad Nwanwu, but when Nzeogwu got to Lagos, he was arrested and detained.
As early as Sunday, the day after the coup, people pursued their ordinary diversions as if they still lived under one of the most stable governments in Africa. No one seemed distressed or puzzled. Perhaps they were right not to be. Perhaps it's all very simple.
In May 1966, Major General Aguiyi publicized the infamous Decree 34 of 1966, the Unification Decree. The decree effectively did away with the federal system of government practiced by Nigerians since its independence from British colonial rule in 1960. In its place, the General instituted a unitary system of government as a way of discouraging tribal loyalties and activities which promote tribal consciousness and sectional interest, and which must give way to the urgent task of national reconstruction. The decree suspended aspects of the Nigerian constitution, and with it, the military government abrogated to itself wide discretionary powers. These actions would come to haunt Ironsi later in power, as the Northerners didn't like the idea of the Unification Decree. Their reactions to the decree was violent, which led to massive protests and the death of Igbo people living in the north. They began to see the coup as an Igbo plot to dominate the country, and that the January 15 coup conspirators had not been tried for treason and were being paid while in detention. This led to the beginning of the counter-coup, also known as the July Remarch, which was masterminded by Lieutenant Colonel Muritala Muhammad with the support of Major Theophilus Danjuma, Lieutenants Buka Suka Dimka, and many others, on 28th of July 1966. This coup was one of the bloodiest coups in the history of Nigeria, which had Aguiyi Ironsi removed from power.